Well, me and Blair have known each other for a while just through the Glasgow music scene. So Blair was working on a music video for my band TeenCanteen, and we were just having a back and forth about what that video would look like, and a conversation sprung up about how our girl band's depicted in music videos. And then you start going, oh, it's weird there's not been that many girl bands from Scotland. And then it kind of became a kind of joint hold my beer moment where Blair was listing bands and I was listing bands, and it was like, someone should make a film about this. And then a week later we were at Jeanette Gallagher's cottage in Dunbar speaking to her about our time in the McKinleys.
I think Carla had the initial suggestion of, I think you said you'd always want to make a documentary about it.
Yeah.
So I thought, hey, well, I make documentaries, let's do it. Yeah, for me, as Carla pointed out, big music fans. Right, I'm not involved in bands or anything, but it's probably a bigger love for me than filmmaking is. So, realising there was this incredible untold series of stories, it just immediately seemed like something I had to latch onto and start making as quickly as we could, which is how we went about it.
I think as well, when you're both vinyl heads like me and Blair are, you love that thing where you find something that's a bit rare or a bit unheard and it becomes a gem in your collection and stuff. And, it was that thing of being in a girl band myself, realising that these were hard to find records. I couldn't find the music, and you start and ask why. And my band, TeenCanteen, when we emerged, we felt very much alone. And when you're a music fan, you consume biographies and documentaries and compilations and stuff, and it was frustrating not be able to find it. And I think subconsciously I was looking for these other bands to kind of validate TeenCanteen and our experience, and realising that my experience of being in a band didn't feel represented, when it's all women together making music. Making a film's much longer than making an album. I think I went into this quite naively thinking 2 years maybe, that'll be it. But it's been quite interesting because I am very much an independent and DIY musician, and I'm really lucky to have a support network around me and collaborators that make music with me. And this is on a much bigger scale when you're making a film. But, I always was using the analogy it's a bit like, if you're in the studio and you're mixing a bit and you realise that vocal takes wrong, so you just want to redo it or something like that,
I can remember sitting about thinking, right, let's sort of write it as much as possible after we've done all the interviews and research that. Let's sort of write what we wanted to say, because I knew that there's this big period where you get stuck in the edit suite, try to work out what the structure should be. But we still had to go through that process. Just because there's so much material and there's so many stories, and something we've said quite a lot about it is, and really each band in it merit a documentary in their own right. So to try and shoehorn that into something which is a kind of watchable length in a feature doc shape, that was the biggest job really. And there was so much stuff coming in and out every week. We took something out that we'd only just put back in, and then went back into the interviews and brought out something that hadn't been in it ever. And that process went on right to the very end of it. So yeah, we sort of knew it was going to take a long time, but I told for some shortcuts, but there was no shortcuts. You have to slug it out.
You have to slug it out, but I think also much in the way of making an album or anything creative, there comes a point where you have to just step back and go, okay, we've done what we can do in the time and the budget given and stuff like that, and then you just have to let it go out and find its audience. And I really believe that anything creative, when you put it out in the world, it does find its tribe and who it's meant for. I think we always say Christmas Day, or 5 Christmas days rolled into one, was when Jill Bryson from Strawberry Switchblade sort of turned up with this polka dot suitcase just full of hundreds of unseen photographs and negatives and stuff like that. And it was just wow, this is amazing. But one of my favourite stories is, I love the band Hello Skinny from the 90s. They're the ultimate bedroom teenage angst band, and I think they'd recorded this demo tape and there was only 3 copies of it in existence everywhere. And we met up with Fabi and she didn't have a copy, and then when Sunny came to do the interview, she was like, oh, by the way, I've got this tape. And you're like, oh my God, this is the only surviving one. And I remember sitting with it in my flat, waiting to drop it off to get digitised, and just the pressure of like, I'm the only one in the world with this in my flat right now, and I don't have contents insurance, you know, because it's such a like an important thing, you know.
Yeah, there was that. It was coming from two different sides. There was stuff that people had, you know, in the quintessential cardboard box under the bed. There was archive coming from that angle, but also there was some incredible stuff in broadcast archives, which, because of the subject, the nature of the subject of the documentary, no one's going to pull this stuff out, probably since it was broadcast in like 1982, 1983, whenever it was. So it was quite exciting to hear about the prospect of that stuff existing, and then finally getting to see it. That stuff's in the documentary. But there was actually a lot more, you know. We went from thinking, it's going to be tough, we're going to have to get creative for this, because there's probably not going to be the same amount of archive. The exception of Strawberry Switchblade, there's probably not going to be that much archive for a lot of the bands. But yeah, actually kind of pleasantly surprised by how much was there when we went digging for it.
And also it was amazing just doing a call out on like social media and really utilising that, because we had all this fan base that had been with us from the start with a Kickstarter, you know, and it was global. And just the process of digging for archive and broadcast, but fans, we uncovered 1,500 artefacts for the archive. So then you're just like, oh my God, how do we fit all this in a film, you know?
Again, given the nature of the film and who's in it, you end up putting it in for a lot of festivals. I mean, there's some big names floating about in the festival circuit, and it never felt right, the prospect of a premiere somewhere that A, wasn't in Scotland, and B, that a lot of the cast probably wouldn't be able to go to. So when we got the offer from Edinburgh, it just seemed like as perfect a fit as we could have. And then the layer on top of that of being the closing film. I don't know if that's totally set in for me yet. I think it'd be a bit more on edge if I had done. So that's probably going to happen about 5 o'clock tonight.
I think as well, like we've always said, it's not our film, it's the women in the film, it's their film. So it's right, it sits with the ethos of the film that they can be here for their premiere. It's not our premiere, it's theirs. And also, you know, when we're talking about like such a lack of support in the music industry for women making music, to have the support of such an established film festival is really like hopeful, I think, you know. And so it means a lot to everyone involved, and it also means a lot, I think, to the wider music community to be supported that way.